Good morning. So I'm hanging out at the car shop and this has kind of been rumbling through my brain and it's time to talk about it. So I had a friend message me last night and she was having some political disagreements with her family. Specifically, she was trying to not get drawn into the disagreements. And so she was like, okay, this is making me really anxious and I need a break. And she, like me, is naturally a very agreeable person. So, in the realm of personality types, we tend towards one bent, either being more forthright or being more agreeable. And your girl over here is on the agreeable side. And if you're watching this, you might be too, or you might be more naturally disagreeable, and in which case, we need you people too. But I mostly know how to help you agreeable folks. So anyways, the important thing to remember is what is best for everyone. And not just everyone, but what is best for ourselves. If you're in a situation where you're trying to just find harmony, but also not completely be a pushover and not give way to letting flattery or badgering talk just completely wear you down, which happens. And when people want to get their way and they know that we can get pushed and pushed and pushed into agreeing with them for the sake of whatever they've got going on, that starts to wear on our convictions after a while. Like, okay, it gets angering, to be honest. So the thing to remember is, what is the principle that I care about most in this situation? Now, for my friend, she's got family members who lean left politically, who lean right politically, and both of them are trying to get her in on their side. And she's like, okay, I want to stay above the fray. I want to keep my distance from this because, like, seriously. And I'm the kind of person where I don't enjoy talking about politics. My husband asked me one time, do you even care about politics? Because I'd, kept it under the rug for so much. I mean, we were politically on the same page, but I just refused to talk about it. I proceeded to cry in his arms and struggle with foul language while talking about how abortion is legal and funded and things like that. And don't get me started on the justice system, and don't get me started on people who are killed inappropriately by the police. That is a bucket of rant for another day. But yeah, that is wicked, and the Lord sees, and we just have to trust and pray, and yes, use legal system to try and get done what needs to get done. Paul was not ashamed to say, hey, you realize you just flogged me and I'm a Roman citizen? He was not afraid to use political ends, to defend himself and uphold his boundaries. So we absolutely should use, legal recourses. There's a reason that the ACLU, ACLJ, I get them confused. One of them is liberal and one of them is a Christian conservative group that takes up cases and gets lawyers involved. So anyways, they both get lawyers involved. ACLU, ACLJ, I think it's the ACLJ that's Christian conservative, but I don't remember. Point is, we have to remember the principle that we care about most in the situation. And that takes calming down, that takes zooming out, that takes reflecting on the issues before we get drawn in. You can't always schedule when someone is going to try and draw you into a disagreement, but you can, sometimes you can mentally prepare if it's a reoccurring thing. If it is a recurring thing, I'm sorry, but that's also probably why you're here. So in my friend's case with the politics, I emphasized that, try and find the common ground. Like, I have friends who are left-leaning, and in that case, like, we don't talk about politics. We don't talk about politicians. I try to avoid talking about specifics as much as possible. I try and stick to talking about the principles, and again, finding that common ground what we can agree on, and then let the disagreement trickle into the specifics. But the important thing is to reasonably maintain peace with the other person, maintain your relationship with the other person, but also stand for your convictions and stand for the truth. So, in the case of politics, emphasizing, the way things ought to be, emphasizing, that God created us all in His image. We are all, worthy of being respected as human beings. Now, some people earn more respect than others. Some people earn less of our respect, and there are certain presidents who you may or may not respect, but you still need to respect them as an image bearer of God, which is really hard sometimes, but I believe in you. You're a big person, and you are also made in the image of God, and if you ask God to help you with that, He's pretty good about giving wisdom out. Kind of promises it unconditionally to those who ask in faith. See James 1. If I reference this 100 times, if I've referenced it once, I've said it 100 times. But I love that wisdom is one of the things where you ask God, and if you ask it in faith, He will give it to you. Oh, yes. Yes, please. More wisdom. Proverbs 8, wisdom cries out in the streets. Insert rant here. Nah, I just want to read the whole chapter. But I don't have my Bible on me, and my Bible's on my phone electronically, so insert that chapter here. So by emphasizing the principle of, I care about people because God cares about people, but also emphasizing the principle of we are individually responsible for ourselves. There's lots of situations where, we can't control things that happen to us. We can't control, I'm at a car shop, we can't control things that happen to our car. We can't control, bad things that come into our life a lot of times. However, what we do in response to those, what we do in response to healthy, righteous anger in those situations is good. And, something I've journaled and I haven't talked about yet is, God, please help me to place my hurt in the right place. And also I would say, God, please help me to use my anger responsibly. There's a time and place for righteous anger. So, now, I would say unrighteous anger is when you're being selfish. It's when you are only thinking about, it's when you have a small perspective. It's when you are not seeking wisdom, seeking God's perspective for the situation. But righteous anger is when, okay, this is wrong and there needs to be justice for it. And, if we grew up in an unhealthy situation, a lot of times it's hard to confuse, it's easy to confuse righteous anger from unrighteous anger. And it's easy to be guilted because of righteous anger, and that just takes sitting in front of God and asking Him to show you and asking Him to give you wisdom, because He will show you how to handle that righteous anger that sometimes is so strong and passionate we don't know what to do with it. We're so torn up about it. So So first of all, emphasizing the principles that we do agree on, emphasizing, we are all made in the image of God, and we are all personally responsible for what we do in our individual situations. We are personally responsible for our attitude at any given time. Yes, we can be angry, we can be hurt, but we are still responsible for our attitude. We are still responsible for trusting God's goodness in whatever situation we are in. And that is hard. That is actually one of the hardest things ever. And I think the reason that the healthy part of the church sometimes doesn't make room in their hearts for empathy is because, and really tears me up to say this, but a lot of times the reason that quote-unquote healthy people don't make the room in their hearts to empathize with people who are hurting is because they are scared to ask, they are scared to trust God for his goodness in that situation. And Diane Langberg has mentioned that, and I have to go and rewatch her lectures actually, and let me make a note to link Diane Langberg in the comments in the description below. Okay. Alright, there's enough initials of a note. Diane Langberg has mentioned that her walking through other people's trauma as a professional counselor has really challenged her faith. It's really challenged, okay, God, are you still good in the midst of this? And believe you me, she's heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories of this, where it's just disgusting human depravity. And she's mentioned being, you know, up on stage in a worship service in the middle of church and thinking, if people knew what I was thinking about right now, they would not believe it. And she has had to go through, she has experienced vicarious trauma. So when the verse says, weep with those who weep, it's actually a huge, expensive challenge. Huge and expensive. And a lot of the quote-unquote healthy part of the church does not want to make the room in their time, their emotional energy, and the budget of both of those to empathize with, you know, trauma that hurting people are experiencing. And that's why hurting people feel like they can't be heard. That's why they feel like they don't matter. And if that's been you, I am so sorry. If that has been you, I am so sorry that you were pushed off. And that is hard, that is painful. You know, it's easy for those folks to say, well, you go see a counselor over there. You know, because they're putting up walls and boundaries. And they want to be nice, good people, and so they may have an outward front of that, but they're actually not walking in it. They're not walking in that weeping with those who weep. Sacrifice. God calls us to give him the sacrifice of praise, and it's actually way more expensive than we generally think about. That's not a pretty verse in Hobby Lobby with roses on it. Like, the sacrifice of praise is Job getting on his knees in the midst of losing all of his children and all of his welfare and livestock and saying, you know, blessed be the name of the Lord. And his health. Job was a spoonie. Insert that rant here. Never thought that. No, I never realized that before. So entering into the pain and the anger and the sadness is really, really expensive. And it doesn't happen a lot because people are just trying to cope with their own life that they haven't trusted God for necessarily. So just because people look healthy on the outside, just because people have a facade of, yes, I trust God or whatever, you will know by the quality with which they empathize. And I mean, again, this is a sliding scale, and this is, we as hurting people need to resist judging. There are people who are better at empathizing because they have trusted God with their own righteous anger, and there are people who don't know what to say because they have been blessed to be sheltered by the hand of the Almighty God, and they just don't know how to relate. And in those cases, sometimes they say stupid things, and sometimes we as the hurting person need to show grace to them and also distance ourselves and find somebody else who can help us. Or maybe God is putting us together with that person to grow them as they are trying to help us but don't know how. And that's really, really hard and painful in its own set of ways. But I was talking about how to be disagreeable. Before I get back to explaining the importance of being disagreeable and how to be disagreeable, it is important to emphasize that having the personality trait of being naturally agreeable is not a bad thing. And my friend was saying last night, like, oh my gosh, I am such a people pleaser. It's like my worst trait. Like, wait. Don't use self-talk like that. So, first of all, being an agreeable person is a gift, because if everybody were disagreeable, there are cultures that are more disagreeable than others. So Germans are more naturally disagreeable, and Hispanics are more naturally agreeable, and Germans will tell you to your face, blah, 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 like disagreeableness, I think this. That's not true for all of them, but a fair number of them. Whereas Hispanics are more like, oh yes, isn't that nice, and blah, 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 and Southerners too. Oh my gosh. But Hispanics will be like, da-da-da, and then they'll go around, and then they'll like talk about you behind your back. But that's not actually like how it's supposed to work. So both culture needs to learn from the other trait, and I actually have a chart that I need to get out. I need to get out the dry erase markers and talk about the importance of truth and grace, and hopefully I can make that my next video. Anyways, when that's done, insert that link here. Okay, note to self. Note to self. Okay. Oh gosh. And then there are people who, they just don't care. They're apathetic, they only care about themselves, and apathy is like worse than hatred, because you literally don't care about your fellow human, which is not respecting the Imago Dei, which is really, really sad and awkward. And if you are in relationship with someone who's just apathetic, boundaries. Boundaries are your new bestest, friendest, everest. And that's the second part of being successfully disagreeable. So, in my friend's situation with the politics, I had emphasized, okay, find the principles you agree on, and then state, I do not have the emotional resources to continue talking about this. I had to pull that at work one time, which was like, my friend was talking about politics, and it was gotten to the point where I couldn't do my job. I couldn't focus on what I was doing for my job, and I said very plainly, I said, I appreciate the honor of discussing this with you. I literally used that phrase, and my friend snickered, because it's like politics. Everybody talks about politics. It's like the muddy pigsty of conversation topics. However, I said, I know, I appreciate the honor of discussing this with you, but I cannot discuss this with you. And the implication was right now. And he was cool. Like, we could have talked about it another time, but we just let it slide, and we put that in our we don't talk about this category box, which those boxes are good to have sometimes, but they also, if the box gets covered by the rug of things that we should talk about, that mixed metaphor is really messy. So if the category of things we don't talk about gets too big, that is its own form of conflict, and that's needs to be dealt with too. But I haven't thought about advice for that right now. But emphasizing, agree on the principles, and then say, I do not have the emotional resources, I do not have the time to discuss this with you. I cannot get embroiled for my own mental health. I cannot be involved in taking sides and sticking to that. And if they try and draw you out, do circle through again. Like, okay, I agree with you on this principle, and I am not able to discuss this. I agree with you on this principle, and I cannot discuss this. And after you circle through, like, 3 times, like, okay, your first time explaining, I can't discuss this, and you do that 2 more times, just walk away. Or if you physically cannot walk away, just shut your mouth. Literally, just physically shut your mouth, and then just make expressions like, you know, and non-word sounds to communicate things you've previously stated with words. Because if you keep repeating yourself, you'll just get frustrated and angry. But have you ever tried to arm wrestle someone where they didn't put their all into it? And so if you try to arm wrestle someone who's a limp noodle, it'll just
Royster? Who? Royster? Yeah. Oh,
it'll just go like this.
No problem. You come prepared. This is great.
I kind of forgot where I was, but if you keep going in circles, you'll just, if you keep trying to use words, you'll just get angry and frustrated because you already, or just keep saying the same thing over and over again. That works too. That works too. So that is one method for how to be disagreeable successfully. And the last thing I want to mention is it is important to be by nature an agreeable person. Like, the world would be a lot more brutal place if it didn't have agreeable people. But the thing is, in our agreeableness, in whatever we're doing, we need to keep God's purposes forefront, that big picture wisdom. And the more that you understand, like, okay, this is how God made the world, and this is the principles by which everything functions, the easier it is to find peace, really. You know, be at peace with other people, you know, come to terms and be at peace with our own righteous anger, and also, you know, have God help you with the unrighteous anger, because Lord knows that happens. And, you know, putting that before Him and saying, God, I still feel angry about this, and I need you to help me. I need you to help me have a good attitude. Please help me focus on praising you and the sacrifice of praise in this situation. Please remind me of your goodness in this. So, I hope this vlog encourages you and helps you. I'm really, really sorry that you are in a situation where you are watching this video. And I'm laughing out of knowing and irony, not laughing at you, because there's a lot of situations where it's just, there's way more factors than we can deal with in one sitting. There's factors that take us years of sifting through to really come to the bottom of, and the main thing to remember is God is still good. God is still good, and He is going to work all things out for the good of all of those who love Him, regardless of what we see in the day-to-day. And when we have that faith, it continues to bring us peace. And one day we will all be with Him, and it'll all be worked out. Perfect justice, perfect, fully revealed goodness of God. My name is Meg. I love my Jesus, and I believe in living inside out. Now it's your turn. Go live it.